All right, so now we're going to start talking about explosion views. These are used in assembly diagrams, assembly drawings, anything like that. These are typically used in addition to working drawings. So when you have an assembly, you'd want to have some sort of way of showing how the part is assembled. The assembly drawing also has the bill of materials, so you know every component that's needed to make your part. These can be very large when you have a whole bunch of screws, a whole bunch of tiny parts, a whole bunch of parts in general. These can get pretty long, but they are extremely helpful, and they're a great way of showing how your components are assembled. And so we're going to be looking at the valve assembly that we created, and we're going to create an explosion view out of that, and we're going to create an assembly diagram with a bill of materials. And this is nice because we see we've got the balloons showing the which part number, so we can look over here and we can see how many we need as well. So this is really nice to have for your parts. Also, if you look on Canvas, there are some more examples of some good exploded views. Again, with the balloons indicating the part number, and then over here, which is kind of hard to see because it's really small, we've got the part description, what number it is, and then the actual part number. So if you were to create this, it has the part numbers and then the quantity of them. So let's go ahead and get started. So we want to make sure that we have our valve assembly opened. And the first thing that we are going to want to do is we're going to want to create another view. So whenever we create a drawing and we add a base view, and we have that top, back, front, left, right, those are views that we can access from the modeling application. So if we go to the part navigator, we have model views. So if we double click on them and make them our work view, these are the views that we see whenever we create a drawing and we access a certain view. So what we want to do is orient our valve bank the way that we want the view to look. So we don't want to be dead on from the side or from the back. We want to be angled a little bit. And we also don't want our lines to be crooked. So we don't want something like this. We want this straight line to be vertical. Remember that we can access different ways to orbit depending on where we are at on the screen. So I just want to turn this a little bit so I can get that line vertical. And I think that where I'm at right now is pretty good. So I can see this back plane. I can see the fulcrum and everything. And my lines are pretty much vertical. I could maybe change this a little bit, but I think it's good for us for right now. So I have the view positioned where I want. So I want to actually set this as a view. So I'm going to go to Model Views, right click, and I'm going to say Add View. And now because we were in the left side view whenever we positioned this, our new view is called left number 1. And this is our work view. This is the view that we're in right now. It's the one that we just created. I'm going to change the name of this. And I'm going to say exploded view. Because what we're going to do is we are going to create our exploded view in this view. And we'll only be able to access it in this view. So if we go to the top view, everything will look just like it is right now. Even though we've created the explosion, we can only access that explosion in our exploded view. So the way that we start to move these components around is, so we are in our view. This is our work view. We want to come up to assemblies, and we're going to go over to explosion. We want to create a new explosion. We want to make sure that we have manual selected, and we can go ahead and start to, we can select our components. We come over here to specify orientation. We can start to move the components. And this is physically where we're moving them, we're exploding them in this view. We don't want to get so close that we can't really tell that it's moved off of where it was originally. We also don't want to come all the way back here. We want just some space, but not too much. So somewhere around there. Hit apply. And we can select multiple components at the same time. So I want to move all three, the fulcrum, lever, and the knob. Move that off like that. Hit apply. And now I want to just move the lever and the knob. Now just the knob. And I want to move the spool. And I want to make sure that I get all of the O-rings as well. So I can actually go to the assembly navigator. I can select the O-rings, and I can hold down control and select the spool as well. I could have also hid the block. I can come over here and hid the block, and then just selected all of the O-rings either way. And I want to move those. I'm going to move this up, and actually I want to move this back a little bit too. Not too much, just a little bit. That's probably good right there. I'm going to move this down. And I want to move these O-rings up. We'll hit OK. Now, if we need to make a change on this, I could go back to explosion. I could select our explosion 1, and we could do edit explosion. And then we're right back to here where we were before, and we can move these components again. Just because we have moved them, it doesn't mean we can't move them again. Now, if we wanted to turn the explosion on or off, we could hide the explosion. And we can turn it back on. Now, it might look like we went through all that work to create this assembly and we just completely destroyed it. But remember, it's only in this view. So if we went back to the right view, everything is back the way that it was. Assembly should work the way that we had it before. Everything is good to go. And then if we go to our exploded view, boom, there's our explosion. We can control what views we actually see this in. So if we wanted to see it in the top view, we just need to make the top view our work view. go to explosion, select our explosion, and then down here we can say show explosion in work view. Remember, our work view is our top view right now. We can show the explosion in that view. We can go to another view and everything is back the way it was. Still exploded in our top view and still exploded in our explosion view. So to get that back to where it was regularly, let's go back to explosion, and we can say hide explosion in visible view. Let's go back to our exploded view, and we want to add in our trace lines. So the trace lines are these sort of dashed lines. These are showing the orientation of how this is assembled. So to add in those trace lines, we are going to go back to our explosion, and we want to click on create trace lines. Now we can start adding these trace lines where we want them. So do start point and end points. Hit apply. Apply. So for something like this, we can actually control how far we want this to stick out. That should be good. And then also, if we wanted some different solutions here, if we go down to path, we can click on these alternate solutions, and it sort of gives us other ways to draw these trace lines. So if the one that it automatically generates isn't what you were wanting, try that alternate solution. We can hit OK. Now, if we need to make a change to the trace lines, we don't have to go back into the explosion. We can just double click on our trace line and we can make the change that we need. All right, so once we're happy with our trace lines, we're going to go to application. We're going to go to drafting. We want a size B. Hit OK. You can fill all this information in. Now, the view that we want we go to model view to use. We want our explosion, our exploded view. We can place it on our sheet. And we don't want all these center lines for the exploded view. For assembly drawings, don't really need any of those. So we're going to go through and we are going to hide all of those. So as we have all the center lines out, we can kind of see how our trace lines aren't extending to where we want them to be. They're being cut off a little early. So we want to go and change that. So we're going to click on the boundary box, go to settings. We're going to go to trace lines. And we want to turn off create gaps. Now they are extending the full distance. So there's something else that we can change here. And that is going to be our smooth edges. So our smooth edges, we've seen these before. It's okay to leave them the way that they are. We can come in here and say show end gaps. That's going to cut off our edges a little early. We can also change the line thickness here. So right now it's at the original, which is the 0.70 millimeter, but we can make that line a little bit lighter to kind of show the rounded edges different from those visible edges. So I'm going to leave that at about 0.35 millimeters. You can change that if you want to. That's totally up to you. It's your preference. Now to create our parts list, so we want to come up to table and insert a parts list. This is going to be our bill of materials. And we can click over here to insert it. And we also want to put in our balloons. And we do that by going back into our parts list. Could have done that while we originally put it in. The way that we go back into the parts list is we want to, as I approach this left-hand corner, that sort of box appears. You can double click on that. And the parts list pops back up. And we want to go to balloons. We want to show balloons. And it's going to ask us what view we want to show the balloons in. We only have one view available. So we will click on our exploded view. We will hit close. And now we want to sort our parts. So ideally what we want is to have some sort of numbering system here. So we either want to go from 1 to 7 or 1 to 7. We don't want sporadic 6, 5, 4, 1, 2. We want to have some sort of order to this. So we want to sort our parts list. And so we're going to come back over, select the entire thing. And then we are going to right click and go to sort. We want a manual sorting. And this is where we get to select the order. So I'm going to go from 1 to 7 over here. So number 1, I want to be the knob. I'm going to choose the knob, and I'm going to go down so that it is number 1. And then I want the lever to be number 2. So I'm going to choose the operating lever, bring that down to number 2. And I'm going to keep doing that for all of these parts. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That's good with me. I'll close that out. So now we can kind of organize the balloons a little bit. There's a couple of things we need to address, like this right here. Don't like how the arrow is pointing down, rather have the arrow pointing straight towards the center. Don't really like where this is pointing to. I'd rather it point up a little higher. Same thing with this. Might want to change this so that it's pointing towards the center. And then this right here, don't like it pointing towards this second O-ring. I would rather have it pointing up here. So we can edit these balloons. We can just double click on them. If we want to change where the arrow is pointing, that's going to be our terminating object. So we can come over to select terminating object, and we can actually select where we want that to be pointing. I want it to be pointing maybe about right here. And then we can move our balloon. That's probably good. Same thing with our number 2. Change our terminating object. I'm gonna move it up to like maybe about right there. And I'll move this. We also don't want it to be like straight across. We want there to be somewhat of an angle. Four is good, 5's good, 6 is fine. 7 is the last one that I want to change. And I think that's pretty good. Just like with our dimensions, if you want to line these up, you can. Ours don't look terrible. If you had a bunch of these, though, you'd want to line them up, and you don't want, the balloons to be so far away. You also don't want them to be, really close together. So we just want to make them organized, just like we do with our dimensions. Want to make it readable, and want to make it easy to decipher what's going on. We don't want someone looking at this and being confused. All right. So last thing we want to do is add a note so that we have a title here. We can call this valve assembly. Save this as what's mentioned on Canvas, and make sure that you submit this to the Dropbox. All I need for this assignment is the working drawing. So all I need is this right here, printed as a PDF.